Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Urban Heat Island Mapping Results webinar. My name is Morgan Szabo, and I am the Climate and Health Communications and Outreach Coordinator within NOAA's Climate Program Office. We are so thrilled that you all could join us today for this special webinar regarding the 2021 Urban Heat Island Mapping campaigns through the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, NIHHIS, and CAPA Strategies. We had another amazing year of heat mapping across 11 states, and we are so excited to share this information with you all today. I would like to welcome all of our esteemed speakers and panelists and want to thank them again for joining us today. We have a wide range of speakers, including 4 of the 2021 UHI campaign cities, who will be talking to us about their experience in mapping results. First up to present will be our moderator for this webinar, Cooper Martin. Following Cooper's presentation will be a 2021 UHI overview by Joey Williams of CAPA Strategies, and then presentations from 4 of the campaigns. After the presentations will be a moderated Q&A session where the audience can ask questions to the panelists about their experience participating in the NIHHIS CAPA UHI mapping campaigns. We would especially like to invite any cities interested in participating in the 2022 campaign year to ask any questions to our panelists. So to officially kick off our webinar is Cooper Martin. Cooper is the Director of Sustainability and City Solutions with the National League of Cities, and we are absolutely thrilled to have him here to present and moderate our webinar today. So thank you, Cooper, and off to you.
Thank you very much, Morgan, and hello, good afternoon to everyone. Once I get permissions, I'll start showing my screen here momentarily. There it is. We will go to monitor 2. And can you confirm, Morgan, that you can see this now?
Perfect.
All right, great. Well, like I said, I'm very happy to be here today to moderate this great discussion on urban heat island mapping. And if you're joining us on the webinar today, you probably already know most of the dangers associated with extreme heat. But to quickly review, obviously, there's a lot of challenges that cities are dealing with, from increased energy consumption, which costs residents money, it stresses critical infrastructure, leads to blackouts, other kinds of systems failures. It also directly causes more pollution, particularly in areas that use window systems or have high greenhouse gas emitting power sources. So you end up with more GHG emissions while people are trying to use air conditioning and keep themselves cool. In addition to that direct pollution, heat can reduce air quality through photochemical reactions that increase levels of ozone and other pollutants that are known to cause chronic lung and heart disease. At extreme levels, heat is obviously an acute risk to elderly populations, children, anyone working outdoors. Heat is one of the #1 climate-associated causes of death in the United States and around the world. And temperatures are even warmer at night often than they are due to reduced overnight cooling. So your body just never has a chance to rest and recuperate and recover overnight when you have high heat urban areas. And as we're going to hear a lot today, all of these problems and others are disproportionately seen in low-income communities and neighborhoods, communities with higher concentration of Black people and other people of color. So this is not just an infrastructure issue, a health issue, an environmental issue, it's also an equity issue. And as we've seen, particularly the last couple of years with regard to COVID, the extreme levels of disproportionate impacts that are being felt in our cities. But today we are here to celebrate some of the cities that are really taking a step to do something about it. The ability to collect heat and air quality data that is high quality, that is fine-grained, has dramatically increased in the last few years. It allows cities to be more targeted, and we're going to hear from several cities that are able to take advantage of this new technology, take advantage of citizen science and participation in this process, and update their plans. So I am Cooper Martin. I am with the National League of Cities, which is the oldest and largest organization representing local governments in the United States. We represent about 2,600 member cities. I am part of the Center for City Solutions and the sustainability program there. And you can see on the screen the mission of our center really is research, technical assistance, and executive education for the mayors, council members, and city staff who make up NLC's membership. For the last several years, this is my team. I wanted to give a shout out to everybody who helps make this work possible. Obviously, I'm here moderating today, but Nick does a lot of work on our renewable energy portfolio with SolSmart. Anna, who does work on primarily our leadership and community resilience program, and Abigail, the newest member of our team, who is working at the intersection of climate and public health. So I think a couple of them may be listening in today. For the last several years, we have run a program called Leadership and Community Resilience. That's how we started working with NOAA from the outset. You can see some of our program goals there, but really we are trying to just reach out and help cities take whatever their next step is in their resilience journey. That can be creating plans, it can be implementing portions of plans, it can be doing more public engagement and partnering with community-based organizations. But we're trying to build the capacity of local governments to do more on climate mitigation and adaptation and make their cities more livable places to live, work, and play. Our program gives $10,000, it's a micro grant program, to the community to help implement this, just to give them a little bit of a boost. We also operate monthly policy and practice exchange to bring cities together and share their expertise, share their experience, share their struggles with one another. And certainly before the pandemic, we always tried to do a local resilience event. That hasn't happened as much the last couple of years, but it's really a great opportunity for us to visit the city, to help catalyze action, to celebrate achievements, to support the public officials who make up our membership. And like I said, that's how we started this informal partnership a couple of years ago, when cities from our 2019 cohort were encouraged to apply for the urban heat mapping program. That was Cincinnati and Jackson. We've worked with about 42 cities over the last several years. So other alumni of this program that have overlapped with us, although not necessarily at the same time, include Raleigh, West Palm Beach, Jersey City, Durham, and our current cohort, Arlington, is here today to talk about the work that they've been doing through the Mystic River Watershed. And this has definitely increased our knowledge as practitioners around the importance of heat mapping data, how it can accelerate legislative change and implementation of resilience programs on the ground. And graduates are still working to figure out what to do with this data, but we're all here to support in the network of organizations that support cities. So kudos again to Anna on my team for sort of starting this informal partnership, for Hunter and Morgan at NOAA for having us here today. And I'd be remiss if I didn't share a couple of resources. When cities are done with this kind of heat mapping work, NLC also has resources, and the NOAA NIHHIS program also has resources to help take the next step to reduce urban heat, expand green space, improve tree canopy, and other things. NLC is part of the Smart Surfaces Coalition, who recently did a different webinar, actually with NOAA and NIHHIS about a month or two ago, on their cost benefit analytic tool to show cities how strategies such as the ones you see here on the screen can improve roads, green space, and building surfaces, strategies to improve building codes, and really look at all of the different surfaces that make up the urban environment to reduce heat, manage stormwater better, improve public health, and all of the things that we'll be talking about today. We also have a pair of fact sheets related to the ARPA and the Recovery Act and how cities can use the funds that are available to them, particularly through the water and wastewater eligibility, the state revolving fund eligibility, to invest in green infrastructure and things like that. So with that, if you have any questions for me or want to get in touch with the National League of Cities and talk more about what we're doing, definitely follow up with me after the webinar. But I'm going to stop my slide share here and introduce Joey Williams, who is the manager of CAPA Strategies. And excuse me, something just changed on my screen. He's manager of CAPA Strategies, who will be giving an overview of the 2021 campaign and some of the other mapping work that's done. So Joey, you are able to take it away.
Thanks, Cooper. I'm going to slides here, and I'm actually going to invite Vivek Chandasan, our advisor, to kick us off.
Hi, Joey. Hi, everybody. Vivek Chandas here. Really exciting day for us. This is the day we look forward to every year, coming in on the end of the campaigns. All the reports are out. The buzz is in the air. We can definitely feel it. And I just want to take literally 1 minute to kind of congratulate you on achieving what was a very momentous series of campaigns this year. It was nothing short of magnificent to see all these different community members coming together to go out and collect large amounts of data, which Joey will talk about in a minute, to describe what's happening locally and to really ground this work. As you all well know, this is not done by one group, one stakeholder, one sector. This is a very collective and a collaborative process that we've been developing over the last decade and these last 3 years, where we've really kind of fanned out and started engaging communities all over, have been just really wind in our sails for seeing how this work can actually start taking place on the ground. And without your efforts, this couldn't have happened. We're a pretty small and scrappy group at CAPA, and as the advisor, I see that we bring our heart, our head, and our hands into it. Our heart is really around the focus on equity. Our head is really around data analytics, and our hands are on sensors and climate adaptation planning strategies, which is something we're welcome a chance to dig in deeper around based on these data. I don't want to take too much more time. These photos are just a sampling of some of the great work that happened this summer. I want to turn it over to Joey to say a bit more about the different dimensions of the campaign and just kind of summarizing many of the things that have happened this summer before we turn it over to our case study folks who are going to dig in a little bit deeper. Joey?
Thanks, Vivek. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Joey Williams. If we haven't worked really closely together so far, and I am the program manager of the CAPA Heat Watch program. And I, like Vivek was saying, want to take a moment to thank you all, the organizers and the participants, for your great work this past year, adding 24 new campaign cities to our national effort to get a better grasp on heat and reflect here on some of the ins and outs and highlights of the campaign. So I want to take you back to the beginning of the year when you set out to design the study and to get a better grasp on where in your regions and your cities are being more affected by heat, less affected by heat, and who's impacted as a result. Also getting at questions of why and engaging community members in a meaningful way along the way. In that process, you build partnerships between nonprofits, museums, municipalities, public health officials, and researchers at universities and students in a new effort focused specifically on heat. And so we've seen that momentum from past partnerships carry forward in really robust and promising ways. And so I want to just emphasize that new collaboration, or maybe leaning on an old collaboration in a new way, and what that's adding to the pot here. Also in that study design phase, you engage community members to pick out where in the city is important to them in regards to heat, maybe where they go to cool off as a recreation center, community center, where people might be traveling to their places of work or recreation, where there might be lacking bus shelters with high ridership. And so all of these elements we put into the design and study early on with an equity lens, and that was a really meaningful part of this project back in the spring. And so that intentionality and equity lens is a large part of why this project has been highlighted as part of the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, and we'll continue to report on the equity dimensions and implications of this campaign as we progress. I also want to highlight the challenging role you all took as impromptu forecasters to understand when to time the campaigns to get these peak heat conditions. and to be able to best understand, understand when you can get these peak heat conditions. And I also want to shout out the National Weather Service and Climate Prediction Center from NOAA for their great help in supporting campaign organizers in this challenge of timing. Next, I want to show some really exciting statistics from our campaign this past year, our largest campaign year to date, with 24 cities being mapped. We had our largest single-day campaign ever, with 10 cities mapping simultaneously across Virginia, which is a really impressive effort with over 200 people engaged on that day. Overall, across 2021, we had 236 routes, data collection routes, going by walking, biking, and driving, that engaged nearly 800 community scientists in what must be a record-setting year for community science, especially in climate adaptation. And together, these participants collected over 1.2 million individual measurements of temperature and humidity. We also had quite a range of participation and who was engaged. And just looking at the age statistics, we had a full range of engagement. Young folks, families engaged, older folks. It's just really cool to see from the photos and follow-ups, all the span of people that are interested in this and taking responsibility in their communities. We also had the campaigns expand to other climate hazards this year, which was just an amazing effort by three campaign cities: Mystic River Watershed, as you'll hear more about later, Richmond, Virginia, and the Jersey City campaign with Newark and Elizabeth, measuring PM, particulate matter, as well as black carbon, and with help from Habitat Map and the Rutgers Environmental Lab. So really kudos to these campaigns for taking on a new direction in mobile monitoring, and also helping us to get a better grasp on the spatial distribution of particulate matter and air pollutants in the relation to heat and land cover in new ways that have never been done on this scale before. So we're really excited about that development. In the process of mapping, we also spoke to a lot of reporters and journalists who are bringing this new type of work to light and sharing with communities and in publications from town newspapers in print, all the way up to huge publications like Scientific American and Science Magazine. We had stories covered in CNN and CNBC and AccuWeather, and it just really brings to the public this story and new information about what's impacting all of us and what community members and planners like yourselves are doing about it. So it's just really, this is a really exciting piece of the campaigns every year. And it, as follow-up stories develop, just keep in mind the broad reach that we can have through media. It's very exciting to see. So now that the campaign results are out, we've got 24 sets of data and reports out to our campaign organizers, showing the distribution of heat at 3 times throughout the day at 10-meter resolution, and starting to address these questions or prompt and answer these questions of where is it hotter, where is it cooler, who's being affected, what elements of the landscape might be mediating heat or contributing to heat, and what types of building geometries, layouts, housing policy and single family and multifamily residential developments might be playing out in terms of the heat distribution. And so as you start to overlap data and layers and meet with your collaborating teams, you'll look at these information and we know put them to great use in mitigation efforts and strategy planning and heat preparedness plans, as we've seen past campaigns do. And we're really excited to see how each year progresses here, and as well as support in the best ways that we can as an organization, as cohort and team. This past year, we also saw applications of the data beyond just the places that the data was collected. In Vermont, we worked with state officials in public health to take the data that were collected in one area and predict across smaller towns. This also allowed us to develop approaches to bring in outside sources of validation using land surface temperature and stationary sensor measurements. And so this was an exciting development from the year as well. So the next steps from here, I'll wrap up here briefly. We really are so curious about the nitty-gritty details that you all took note on that will help improve the campaign and program in years forward. So if you haven't had a chance, volunteers and participants, to send back your feedback, all the kind of details and logistics we'd love to hear about here. Also, I know we've been teasing this for a bit. Web apps are coming soon, interactive tools from the NOAA Data Visualization Laboratory that will allow folks to go in and click around and explore their data on a new level. We're continuing these follow-up discussions with the CAPA team, and please continue to share the outcomes from your projects, not just this year, but in years coming. We'd love to hear that, and it really helps develop this field that we're growing together here. New data-informed approaches to climate adaptation and resilience, and we're glad to have you on board and keep moving forward together. So I think I've hit my time here, and I will pass over to our next speaker.
Great. Thank you very much, Joey, and thank you very much, Vivek, for that introductory presentation. I'll turn it over next to Dr. Liv Yoon. Liv is here on behalf of the Manhattan and Bronx campaign. She is a postdoc research scholar at Columbia University's Earth Institute and Mailman School of Public Health. And I think I can see her screen coming up, so I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, can you hear me now and see my screen?
Yes, we hear you and see you.
Great. Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you for inviting me to present based on our campaign this summer. It was certainly, we're really, really excited to share some of the results, and we're certainly very happy that we did this. So my name is Liv. I'm a postdoc at the Earth Institute and the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia. This project was certainly not only led by me, though. I have many colleagues that I work with that I will give shout outs to throughout the presentation, but I am presenting on behalf of all of them. So I'll first provide some background about extreme heat in New York, and then I'll talk about how our project was anchored in community and how the project just wouldn't have been possible without collaborating with our local environmental justice group partner. And then I'll share the results we got and close with what we plan to do with the data. So our project covered mostly northern Manhattan and the South Bronx. So if you can see my cursor from 59th Street here, which is the start of Central Park, and then up north, and the South Bronx here. And these are areas known to be marginalized along race and class lines, also known to be hotter. We did include Central Park and the upper west and east sides here on the two sides of Central Park, for comparison, which are more affluent and mostly white neighborhoods. So for example, here, you see Harlem, for example, West Harlem and the South Bronx, for example, don't have that much tree canopy, and there are very, very densely built buildings. And also, this is Project NIHHIS Housing, New York City Housing Authority. Buildings, and certainly lots of them in the South Bronx as well. Compare that to what you see in Central Park and the upper east and west sides, where there's a ton of tree canopy. So even within this small geographic area, there is a stark difference in landscape, and obviously that manifests in how heat is experienced. So I'm going to show you two maps here that give you a sense of how extreme heat is actually manifested in what people feel. So this is a heat vulnerability index map showing which neighborhoods in New York City are considered most heat vulnerable. And many of you on this, if not all of you, are already very familiar with these maps. So neighborhoods are scored from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. risk assessed by 4 factors. So surface temperature, percentage of residents who are low income, AC possession, and access to green space. So even within this relatively small geographic area of Manhattan, you can see that there are stark differences in how people experience heat and consequences from it. So New York City, in that sense, is a prime case to demonstrate the intersecting and compounding and cascading issues that both contribute to and exacerbate extreme heat-related risks. And this is another figure that really shows you the stark differences in how some groups are disproportionately impacted. So Black New Yorkers die at twice the rate compared to other New Yorkers from extreme heat. So moving on to the community piece here, what made our project possible and better and more meaningful is that it was a deep collaboration with our local environmental justice partners. So South Bronx Unite was our main partner. They are a grassroots group that works to improve and protect the social, environmental, and economic future of Mott Haven and Port Morris of the South Bronx area. And they work on a huge range of things. So environmental justice is one piece, to public health equity, and to arts and cultural equity. And we knew that South Bronx Unite was doing green space advocacy work for their waterfront. And I had a previous relationship with them working on different projects. And we know that the area suffers from the compounding effects of pollution and extreme heat and resulting health consequences. And all the while, climate change is acting as a threat multiplier. So there was a good fit, and we reached out to them, and they were enthusiastically on board. And while South Bronx Unite was our main partner, we also reached out to other groups like React for Environmental Justice in Manhattan, and also local community boards, and mainly to get the areas of concern to the local community. So like, while we also live in some of these areas, some of us live in some of these areas, the researchers, we don't have the level of knowledge about the local areas as people who actually live there do. So we collected these points of interest, so say main intersections or like grocery stores that people frequent. And these are the points of interest that we gave to CAPA Strategies, and that's what the driving routes were determined based upon. And I also wanted to mention these 4 leaders from South Bronx Unite here: Michael Johnson, Dr. Melissa Barber, Ashley, and Arif, because they were completely integral in getting this off the ground and recruiting people. They were just amazing. So absolutely, we could not have done this without them. And so they sent out recruitment calls on our behalf. We also, of course, the researchers at Columbia, we also sent out recruitment calls as well. But we thought that these calls coming from their very local partner, their local organizations that people are familiar with, would probably mean more. And I think that was really effective. And we also had funding from Columbia's Earth Institute. So that allowed us to pay participants for their time and effort. I mean, we were doing this on a weekend. It was a Saturday, and it was a lot of time for people, people who did all 3 shifts. So we were thankful to be able to compensate them. And here are some photos from the day. So our data collection happened on Saturday, July 24th, and one of them was a cycling route through Central Park. All the others were through Northern Manhattan and the South Bronx. So people would go out in pairs and drive this 1-hour-long route 3 times a day. So say, for example, at 6 a.m., there would be 9 pairs going on 9 different driving routes and 1 cyclist, and then repeat this twice more at 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. And as you can see here, this is one of our main base camps. So because we were looking at both the South Bronx and Manhattan, we had 2 base camps, and this is the one in South Bronx. And South Bronx Unite made a day, made a big event of the campaign day by hosting food and music, and they just made this a community-wide event, which was great. And people would come check out what they were working on, and in that sense, we were able to raise awareness about radiation as well, for people who weren't necessarily participating as data collectors. And here's a figure that shows different levels of participation. And this was something that we kept in mind because it was important to us that the community's role in the project wasn't just symbolic. And this figure shows what we aimed for. So it's the top 3. discussion, co-design, and co-decision making ultimately. So, from designing the routes from the get-go to deciding like which media outlet inquiries to answer to, everything was run by South Bronx Unite first. And we really wanted to avoid just getting in touch with them in the beginning and then presenting the results at the end. But also while, of course, respecting that this is not the only project that they're working on. So, if we have to make executive decisions, then we of course got their permission to do so. So here are our results. So you can see morning, afternoon, and evening area predictions. As we had predicted, so Northern Manhattan, East Harlem, well, more so the north end of the Upper East Side, and the South Bronx, especially near the major highways here, are the hotter areas. And these results confirm what we've already known, but and like what people have certainly felt and lived. But because our project is oriented around equity, making the connections between social inequities is our goal. So like redlining, for example, you can see that there's a big coincidence, not a coincidence, an overlap in the areas that were formerly redlined to the areas that are hotter. This is from the HVI map earlier. And also coincidences, overlaps to household income, air conditioning, possession, and also comorbidities that also make you more vulnerable to heat-related risk and make it harder for you to recover. So it's in life expectancy. And it's ultimately these different tentacles of inequities and their links to extreme heat that we want to connect. And what we aim to do is share this data on an open platform and connect the dots by like showing the different maps and making them overlap. Support South Bronx Unite's ongoing advocacy efforts for more green space. And just last Saturday, we had a meeting with the community to ask them what they would like to see. And then we have another one in mid-January. So we're trying to keep channels open for constant input from the community to see where we would like to go. But we're also in talks with New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to see how this data could be put to use. I think my time might be up very soon. Dr. Christian Branyan and I are also part of the New York City Panel on Climate Change, and we're doing the next assessment. So this very, very recent data will be configured into that as well. And we also got a ton of media attention. And before I close, I would really like to thank Dr. Christian Branyan for co-leading this project with me, and Jolie, who is helping us out as a research assistant, and of course, all of our participants and volunteers who made this possible. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Yoon, and I love seeing Christian Branyan up there. I didn't know he was part of the program, but he's an old colleague and participant in some of our NLC resilience stuff. So small world out there. Next, and I already see the slides up, is going to be the City of Charleston campaign with Dr. Kristen Dow, who is the professor at the University of South Carolina and part of the Carolinas RISA program. And since she is already ready, I will turn it over to her.
Hi, all. It's great to be here and share work of a big collaboration in Charleston. Dr. Janice Barnes and I are going to be presenting on behalf of numerous colleagues today. So in Charleston and in South Carolina, heat isn't considered the big threat. The big issue for us is flooding. Since 2015, there's been $1.87 billion coming into the state for disaster recovery from risks related to intense rainfall and hurricanes. And it really has made it difficult to talk about the heat, get attention to the heat-related threats. In Columbia, where I'm from, the town is known as famously hot. It's sort of a joke, but it's not much of a joke where we were working this year. Dr. Barnes had been working with the Charleston Medical District, and it's on the peninsula. I'll show you a map in a second, and realized that there were heat issues of concern down there on this campus for the students and staff and patients who were there. So she reached out to the Carolina Sciences and Assessment team, and we joined her with two different ways of elaborating on the work that she and her partner had done using the FLIR technology. I'll show you what these instruments look like in a second, but we were interested in the personal experience of people working outdoors in the on the different areas of the campus. We were interested in the wet bulb globe temperatures. And the wet bulb globe temperature, a little different than the standard heat index we find, because it'll give you the temperature and humidity we know about, but it also tells you what it's like to stand in the sun versus the shade, and how much difference a breeze can make during those days. And we had these two pieces in the works and in planning, and realized that we had an opportunity to bring these different types of techniques together with the heat watch research. So that's what we moved forward to do. This group, this is a thermochron. It looks a lot like a hydrochron. They both look like buttons you put in your watch, about the size of a penny. And the thermochron measures temperature, the hydrochron measures temperature and humidity. And you just pin it on the lapel of your shirt or on your belt buckle or something, and have it, as long as it's on the outside of your clothing, you can continuously measure the personal exposure. So where someone went, and trying to capture the diversity of the heat landscape around this medical district. We also asked people to wear a standard fitness watch. It has a GPS and heart rate data. And so we have an opportunity to understand the variation in heat stress that people are experiencing. This work is led by Drs. Jen Runkle and Dr. Maggie Sugg. Now, this is a Kestrel. No, it's not really a Kestrel. It's a Kestrel device. It's not the bird, it's the thing. And it measures the wet bulb globe temperature. This work is led by Jordan Clark and his PhD advisor, Chip Conrad. So here's the map I promised to the Charleston area. We've got the very hot peninsula, but also a lot of urbanization. This is one of the fastest growing places in the country, and certainly in South Carolina. And this is our partner, Scott Curtis, the director of the Citadel Near Center for Climate Studies. All right. So bringing this additional data into the understanding of the overall heat experience is a bit of a complicated undertaking, and I'm glad we've got experts like Maggie and Jen to lead on this. The way this worked is that we worked with 3 groups of participants, 2 grounds crews, one on the Citadel grounds, one on the MUSC grounds, and a group of public safety officers, and collected 8,500 observations. You can see them all mapped out here. And the next step for us is to compare what we have here with the information we received from the heat watch and from local weather stations. So are we classifying their heat exposure accurately? Is the protective advice we're giving them sufficiently accurate to keep everybody safe? We're going to go a little bit further from that and develop some heat exposure metrics for people working. This is going to include the frequency, intensity, and duration, and the self-reported health effects to see what relationship there is there in these data sets. And then finally, we'll compare the individual experienced temperatures, those personal temperatures, with the Urban Heat Island information campaign. All right. One of the things we were interested in Charleston, particularly in the medical district, was the diversity of situations that could lead to a great deal of variability in heat exposure. So we took our Kestrel everywhere. It's mounted on this tripod so that it's about 4 feet up just about where most people would be experiencing the air temperature. And we have it near construction sites, on the grass, on the AstroTurf, on the concrete, on the brick, on the asphalt, near the crosswalks where people stand, in the mulch that is there to protect the tree roots. And wanted to capture the differences in all of these areas, because these design choices are opportunities potentially to address some of the heat concerns. Now, for those of you who haven't thought about wet bulb globe temperature and you've wondered what we do with it, the wet bulb globe temperature was developed by the Army because they knew that their people were experiencing heat-related stresses, and they developed a set of guidelines based on flag levels. These flag levels are now really commonly used for high school athletes, and they go from no flags to green, yellow, red, and black. Over 90 degrees of the wet bulb globe temperature, practice should be suspended. And this is important because this is developed for high school athletes, right? This is not the everyday person, and it's probably not the person who's on their way to the hospital for some sort of treatment. And what we learned as we did this was that we were experiencing very high temperatures. You saw that 90 threshold I showed you? Most of what we're looking at here is over 90. I have one little spot marked with an asterisk. That's the importance of ground truthing. This place was only measured in the morning and on a rainy day. So it never really expressed its full potential of maximum wet bulb globe temperature. But what it did tell us is that places where people were likely to congregate, around the farm, on the quad, in the greenway, where patients were dropped off, were reaching wet bulb globe temperatures at which you would not have high school students out practicing. And so this information is going to be brought in with the rest of, with other heat watch information to inform more protective activities throughout the Charleston area. With that, I'm going to have Janice pick up the presentation and talk about those next steps.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thanks for the collaboration with the whole NOAA, NIHHIS, and CAPA team. The preliminary results from Heat Watch were just presented this week to our collaborative team, so the work that Kirsten was talking about coordinating, we still need to do. And since Liv did such a nice job describing the routes and the traverses, and Joey did as well, we'll go on to the next. I think that you know how to read these maps. So if you want to go to the next slide, Kirsten. The kinds of things that we saw from the initial satellite imagery were reinforced. We've got some real hot spots that are problematic. And we know this because the collaboration that started all of this came when a few physicians said they had patient pages where patients had passed out going from their car to their appointment at the hospital on those parking lots Kirsten was just showing you. So let's go to the next slide. So the important thing that we wanted to share here, over and above the incredible value of the Heat Watch campaign and the CISA work that Kirsten just described, is what we've been referring to as sharing is caring. We have developed a coalition of heat research collaborators around the Charleston metro and now moving into the Columbia area, kind of like High Fidelity organized albums autobiographically. This list is in order of how collaborators have begun joining this effort. And there are many people in many of these organizations who need to be thanked for that collaboration. But this is an important part, because to seed the change we need more hands to own this conversation. In the next slide, Kirsten. What we're asking folks to do is to help raise up awareness. Much of what these campaigns, these efforts that we've just described are, is that first step of what is happening around here. You can't get the attention to it when you're walking through 3 feet of water, right? So increasing awareness. Next, we want to gather in the coping strategies that are readily available and to shore up those strategies when they're weaker or have opportunities for things like improved energy security. We want to think more holistically about mitigation, like protect that canopy, increase that canopy. And we also want to think more holistically about adaptation. What does it actually mean when you look at the projections of heat in Charleston and see a tripling of the number of extreme heat days by the end of this century, well within the service life of design decisions that are being made now? Next slide. So what we've seen so far is an incredible amount of growth on these various activities. Embedding heat and health into conversations welcomes in voices that have typically been excluded in technically focused teams. The city and the Charleston Resilience District are now talking about this, and the Charleston Medical District, there's now a resilience strategy, and the master planning teams are thinking about heat and wind movement. MUSC, thanks to Christine von Kolnitz, has declared Heat Awareness Month and is launching that again in 2022. The city, thanks to Mark Wilbert and Dale Morris and others like Susan Johnson, have integrated heat into the Charleston Comp Plan, and even the Tourism Bureau is planning to train guides to help tourists who come to the city to understand their exposure. And Kirsten is leading an effort in Columbia to amplify this work. Next slide, and this is our last one. So what do we see is happening? That amplification of the heat watch and other work, but also a deepening of our understanding of heat health disparities and energy insecurity issues across South Carolina, trying to integrate heat more fully into recovery investments. 1.87 billion, no heat, that's a problem. Deepening the collaboration not only with this CISA and RISA, but with the other RISAs up the East Coast has already started, and then working with the state on their statewide resilience plan and engaging counties and municipalities to think more holistically about that spend. So that's where we are, and thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you very much for the Charleston campaign, and my apologies. I think I said Kristen instead of Kirsten, and I didn't even get to introduce Dr. Janice Barnes there, but thank you both for that presentation. Next, we'll have the Clarksville and Richmond, Indiana campaigns. There'll be 3 presenters here. Dr. Dana Habib is the assistant professor at the Indiana University at Bloomington. Bronte Morell is the heat relief coordinator for the town of Clarksville, and Lucy Mullen is the heat relief coordinator for the town of Richmond. So take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us to present on our heat campaigns for Richmond and Clarksville. I'm Dana Habib. I'm the PI for the Beat the Heat program, which both of our campaigns are part of this larger program named the Beat the Heat program. And I'm an assistant professor at IU and also an affiliate of the Environmental Resilience Institute. I'm joined today with Lucy Mullen from Richmond and Bronte Morell from Clarksville. The Beat the Heat campaign is an Environmental Resilience Institute project, and it's funded by Indiana's Office of Community Rural Affairs. We're working together with our communities of Richmond and Clarksville to develop heat response plans to help our communities become more resilient in the face of extreme heat. We see that with climate change, it's even more important for us to plan for extreme heat. We can see with, for example, with Clarksville, and in our next slide. For Clarksville, we can see more than a doubling of our extreme heat events in Clarksville by the year 2050, and more than a tripling of extreme heat events for Richmond. That's really illustrating the importance for communities to really be planning for extreme heat now in order to increase their resiliency. So we have a wonderful project team for our Beat the Heat program. We have our team from our Environmental Resilience Institute and also our team from our communities with Clarksville and Richmond. One thing that I find that is very exciting about this project is the fact that the program funds 2 full-time positions for both of our communities as heat relief coordinators, which is Bronte and Lucy's respective roles for their communities. The Beat the Heat program is a 2-year project, and we've divided it into 5 phases. Right now, where we're at for our project is that we're on phase 2, which is our community needs assessment. This is the part of the project where we are gathering data for our communities. We're gathering data on vulnerability and exposures, really to understand where are the needs for both of these communities. And moving forward for our later phases is we will be developing heat response plans and protocols to put in place to make the communities be better prepared to respond in times of heat crisis. Bronte and Lucy will be talking about more of these specific aspects of the community needs assessment next in the presentation, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to Bronte.
Thank you, Dana. So here's a quick look at our campaign results for both Richmond and Clarksville. We're not going to focus too much on our actual results, but we want to talk more about our volunteers and really how we organize them for the campaigns. We do have, a smaller number of volunteers in a lot of the larger communities, and so we felt like this really gave us an opportunity to really approach how we recruited volunteers and engage with them after the campaign a little differently. So that's what we'd like to take a minute to talk to you all about right now. In Richmond, Lucy was able to recruit most of her volunteers through social media and email, and had a very core, consistent group of volunteers who all did the same routes from morning, afternoon to evening. And this really helped with those campaign logistics on the day of and made it all run very smoothly. Something she's also done recently is set up a Facebook group for the Beat the Heat program in Richmond. So all of her volunteers and other community members can kind of go there and stay up to date and stay engaged with the project. And so that's been a great resource in that community. In Clarksville, we really jumped at the opportunity to work with some local high school students on our campaign. So we had about 4 students from an environmental science class with the local public school, and their teacher got them involved in the campaign and is even taking the results of the campaign and bringing them into the classroom in this next semester. And they'll be working towards some ideas on campus as far as, doing a tree inventory or tree planting, or even painting their parking lot in some cool surfaces. So this is just really an opportunity as well to get youth more involved in this issue. And I'll say that community engagement as a whole has been something huge as far as our roles as heat relief coordinators, because we really are serving as that bridge between the public and local government on this issue. And so one of the first things that we did as part of Beat the Heat was establish a heat relief task force. So for both communities, this is a cross-section of the community that can help guide and support the program. So in Clarksville, we had a mix of different town and county employees that are relevant to this issue, as well as representatives from our energy sector, local nonprofits, and also those community members who would help us connect best with people who are most vulnerable to extreme heat. So really thinking about how we bring all of those voices to the table and who can help provide feedback and really guide the program. So right now we're meeting on a bi-monthly basis, and members can really contribute kind of as needed. And I'll hand it over to Lucy to talk more about community engagement.
Thank you, Bronte. So moving on to that phase 2 that Dana had mentioned and Bronte had expanded on a little bit more. Both communities are hosting focus groups. So these focus groups are a 1.5 to 2 hour meeting that are between myself and Bronte with our communities that we've identified as most vulnerable. So to the left, you can see the groups that we've already hosted in both communities, and we plan to host a total of 8 in each community, with the rest occurring after the new year. And then to the right, you'll see a map that Bronte used when talking with her senior housing resident group. And she had asked participants to mark on the map places they spend time outside, and then ask them what places they would avoid on a hot day, or places that they may change what time of day that they're actually going there. And you can see some people had said, the morning was the time that they would go because of the extreme heat and would avoid it later in the day. And as you'll see in the next few slides, we're hoping to really engage community members with maps continually throughout this process of community engagement. So then when we aggregate all of the data that we gather together alongside the CAPA heat map, we're able to really have kind of an expansive array of data that we've gathered. So secondly, in community engagement, we're currently running a heat vulnerability comment survey. And so this is like another part of phase 2, where we're trying to gather data from a wide range of individuals in our community. The survey is available in both online and in paper format, and is also available in English and Spanish to ensure that all members of our community are able to provide feedback that we're looking for. And the survey is available to any residents at any point in time. It's posted in a variety of places online, and also paper copies are available in different places around our community. But we're also trying to do some targeted outreach to ensure that we're reaching out to our most vulnerable populations and those necessary to provide feedback on this type of issue. So this targeted outreach involves things like posting the survey in different community-specific groups, hanging door hangers that link to the survey in vulnerable and less responsive areas for the survey, and then also handing out paper copies with things like our local Meals on Wheels distribution survey. And the survey gathers a wide range of information on things that are similar to that of the focus group, things like heat awareness and risk, exposure, how people cool down, community resources, and some of the other things that you can see listed. And then the map at the right is a map of the city of Richmond. And this is the first question that you'll see on the Richmond survey, which asks people where they live. And it'll help us to determine, where in the city residents are responding from, and also based on those responses, potentially where we need to target more of our efforts, depending on the interpretations and opinions they have about extreme heat. So I'm going to now hand it off to Dana, who will talk more about how all of this map data is going to be engaged in the future.
Great. Thank you, Lucy. So one of the first things that we'll do when now that we have our heat campaign results is to upload it to an online database. So we'll be using the Indiana Green City Mapper, which is a online database that we developed with support from the Environmental Resilience Institute. And this database is where we have started mapping out green infrastructure variables, climate variables, and social vulnerability variables for different communities throughout Indiana. So we'll go ahead and put our temperature and heat index variables into this online database so that communities can be able to use this for decision making moving forward and have access to that. Next, we'll also include our heat data as an important metric into creating heat vulnerability indices. As we've seen, there are many cities that have already conducted heat vulnerability indices, and we'll be following their lead by really constructing our HVIs separately for both of our communities, and then really mapping them with exposure, social, demographic, and economic variables, and health data. We're going to be mapping these different indices differently with regard to these different metrics so that the communities can really be able to see who is most vulnerable and where we have some of the most high exposures in our communities. And then next, we'll be wrapping up our phase 2, which will be moving into phase 3. We'll be using this data to really look at how we can develop targeted heat response plans, both short-term and long-term for the communities, as well as develop heat response plans and protocols so that communities are prepared to respond in times of crisis and really increase these resiliencies across the board for our communities. Thank you very much. We've included our emails at the bottom here. If you'd like to learn more about the program, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And thank you again.
Thank you all very much. A reminder to everybody to keep the questions coming in through the question function in the chat as we get set for our final campaign speakers from the Mystic River Watershed campaign. Sarah Benson is the Education Associate at the Museum of Science in Boston, and Melanie Garrett is the Climate Resiliency Manager for the Mystic River Watershed Association. And I can see them both on the screen now with their presentations, so take it away.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the great introduction, and thank you to all the speakers so far. I'm Melanie Garrett. I'm the Climate Resilience Manager at the Mystic River in Boston area, not to be confused with Connecticut. And I'll pass it over to Sarah to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Benson. I am an Education Associate at the Museum of Science in Boston.
So today we're going to be talking about our project called Wicked Hot Mystic. And to ground us, I'll just begin with sharing a little bit about our organization. So, or at least my organization, the Mystic River Watershed Association. And some folks find it confusing that a watershed association is doing climate resiliency work around heat. So let me give a little backdrop. The overall watershed is about 76 square miles, so just about the size of Brooklyn, New York, or Amsterdam, but it houses over 500,000 people, and that is mostly in the lower part of our watershed, which is urban and includes the city of Boston and surrounding areas. And so in the state of Massachusetts, we don't have functional regional government systems such as counties as other states do. And so to reach our climate resilience or adaptation goals, we've created a collaborative called the Resilient Mystic Collaborative. And so we're taking a watershed approach to address our climate problems and climate solutions. And so, as you know, climate change has no boundaries, especially in regards to flooding and heat. And so this collaborative is municipal led and takes into account the needs of each individual community, but at a regional scale. And so we partner on climate challenges no single municipality can solve alone, and that includes extreme heat. So as a couple of other presentations mentioned, extreme heat is simply not talked about, especially in the Boston area. And so we have planned to change that and move from snow days to tackling extreme heat and move beyond Boston's blizzard culture mentality to get our infrastructure and our social infrastructure ready to address all of these extreme heat challenges. So I'll let Sarah take over.
Yes, so we created this project called Wicked Hot Mystic, and we were fortunate enough to do this project before. So next slide, Melanie. So before we started the Wicked Hot Mystic project, we actually did Wicked Hot Boston, which was in 2019, and it had 3 cities in it, so Boston, Cambridge, and Brookline. During that campaign, we had 50 citizen scientists and 10 routes, and we have these amazing maps that you can see on the screen. But we really wanted to expand this. Boston in itself is actually a pretty small city, and as Melanie just explained, it doesn't really have boundaries, and we really wanted to incorporate the entire Mystic watershed that is directly above Boston and include some of Boston as well. So the purpose of this project was to, of course, collect air temperature as well, but we really wanted to engage a lot of our community volunteers around extreme heat, because as Melanie said, heat isn't a huge issue that we think about in the Boston area. We really wanted to focus the mentality to be more on heat. So we collected air temperature data and also air quality data with our volunteer scientists. We also use a platform called IC Change, which is a free citizen science app or website where you can post more information about the heat and how that's affecting you. It grabs heat data, but also it allows us to understand how the heat is actually affecting our community members and the people who live there. So with this data from both IC Change and our air temperature and air quality, we're able to get detailed maps of the heat islands and cool spots in the watershed and help in aid in the development of the Boston area as our climate changes.
And so we wanted to ensure that this was truly a community-led project. And so before finalizing our transects that our volunteer scientists went around, we made a list of stakeholders, including members of the Resilient Mystic Collaborative and different community-based organizations, so that they can share out where are the hotspots in their area to make sure that we include and identify those landmarks. And so then we surveyed everybody on those points of interest, and then CAPA was able to create those transects accordingly and then readjust once we got even more feedback from stakeholders. And so we ended up with 20 car routes, transects, 2 bike routes, and to compare air quality, we also included 3 air quality sensors. This is a little bit of what that looked like within our watershed. And to volunteer or to increase our volunteer recruitment, we had a lot of initiatives. And so we reached out to different partner organizations. And so because this is a large watershed that includes many municipalities and many communities of interest, we wanted to make sure that the community-based organizations who are trusted members of the community were the ones to give out this information. And so we sent out interest forms, availability forms. We also did training with volunteers, and we had a whole team who was really directing all of this work, including my wonderful summer intern, who created some great visuals as well. But all of this was not without any hiccups or road bumps. And so when you're working with a lot of different municipalities in a large area, and when you're working with a lot of different volunteers and many, many transects, and in not very predictable weather, there were some changes. And so we initially had a date in August set up for this data collection, and then we ended up having to change that just a couple of days ahead of time because, of course, we couldn't collect data during a rain event. And so we were able to flip all of our volunteers and get new volunteers for our rain date, and then be able to schedule. Thank God for my summer intern. All the extra help is really helpful to help us get the scheduling going. This is a little bit of what that looked like for all of our different transects. And we were ultimately successful. And what was really interesting about our work is that we made sure to include air quality, as that is one of the top public health concerns in our area as well.
Yeah, so this summer we were able to add on air quality, which is something that we didn't do in the previous campaign. On top of that, we used air beam sensors that were brand new this summer, so the Air Beam 3 by Habitat Map. And we're working with CAPA to integrate that into our heat map. So we do have the air quality data right now and the heat data. Now our next step is to integrate that. And we measured particulate matter, or PM 2.5. So the next slide, this slide shows how we did that. So we attached the sensors onto the window, similar to how the CAPA heat sensors were attached. Every car had them on for every single route, and it's pretty easy to do. You really just turn it on and then ride along with it. And so we were able to collect air quality data at the same time we collected heat data. And as Melanie mentioned, we had 3 stationary sensors as well to be able to compare it to our stationary sensors. I'm not going to go into the protocol, but if anyone is interested, we can certainly talk more about that after, and we have one written up to easily add it on. So next slide. So in the end, we ended up having 80 amazing volunteers and 70 data collection runs that included 2 bike routes. We ended up having to drop 3 transects due to some people backing out or not being able to do it, but that turned out perfectly fine. We still had more than enough data, and we had amazing volunteers. So I think, Melanie, if you just tap through and show some of the amazing tweets that we came through. That's some of our bike routes. That's in front of Museum of Science. And so many people were really excited to be part of this work. And it was really great to see all of that excitement around it. And there's Melanie. So here's some of our data. We're not going to go into really a lot of it, but I wanted to show at least our 3 p.m. map because this is the hottest that it got all day. So you can see that we had a difference of 97 degrees as our hottest and 87 as our lowest. You can clearly see that our hottest area was the lower Mystic, which is a lot more urban area and also an environmental justice communities. And so next slide shows a little close-up of some of our hottest locations, which are East Boston, Chelsea, East Somerville, Everett, and Malden's not on this map, but these are some of the hottest areas that we saw that are very urban and dense. And you can also see some of the cool areas right by Belle Isle Marsh, which is a huge marsh. So it was cool to see that difference, and we will be diving into that a lot more later on. So next slide. So we also did air quality data. This is from 7 to 8 p.m. to show our air quality. And you can see that our routes on this map, you can see that we had higher air quality in the lower Mystic, but also in the upper Mystic as well. So if we go to the next slide, it's a zoomed in version of our lower Mystic. You can see that a lot of our air quality hotspots were also our extreme heat hotspots as well. So Charlestown, Chelsea, and Everett. And then the next slide shows the upper Mystic, which actually had our hottest spot, which was near the intersection of 93 and 95 in Woburn, which you can see is really warm on our map, or not warm, but has high particulate matter on this map. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it back to Melanie to finish us off.
Yeah, so as you could see within these air quality maps, and if we go back to this bigger portion, is that the lower part of our watershed are those environmental justice communities that have both air quality hotspots and extreme heat quality, or extreme heat temperature. And so the next part of our program, because we don't want to stop simply at the data, we want to make this data publicly available so that anybody can look at it and use it however they'd like, especially members from the Resilient Mystic Collaborative, who are our municipal partners. And so this includes planners, it also includes public health experts, and also includes community-based organizations so that they can use it in whatever way that they'd like. And then we'd also like to use this data and layer with different factors. And so one example is on the right, tree canopy or vegetation land cover. We also want to compare it to past redlining. that has been prominent in the Boston area in the 1930s through the 60s. And so we can understand the history and how past policies have influenced this region in terms of extreme heat, and how policies can actually influence this region for solutions. And so this will aid us in making sure that we focus on community-led solutions. And so part of the next step is also getting feedback from the community. Did we get these maps right? We want to make sure that this is ground truthing or ground truth by the community. And so that way we can make more detailed maps as the communities need. We also have funding for artist engagement, and so that means that they can visualize this data and this information in a way that mirrors their lived experience in whatever medium they would like. We also plan to get feedback on the results and focus on the solutions. And so in the spring, we have planned to have a heat fair and a heat prep focused on public health. We will also have a Boston area heat forum that will include different projects in the Boston area that are also looking at extreme heat. And we also have to have at least one meeting in Spanish and preferably more in different languages spoken in our region. So that way folks can come with their full selves and share their lived experience with their community and be able to give us feedback on what solutions to implement. And then we, as part of the Resilient Mystic Collaborative, will be able to actually find funding for those solutions and then actually implement them in the future in real time. And so I'll leave you with this. Oh, I don't think it's working. This was a cute video that was come up, but that's all right. I'll leave you with a great thank you to all of our partners, and I'm excited to hear any questions that you may have.
All right, and I think we can all come back onto screen because I'm going to ask a general question of the entire group here to start with the Q&A portion. And the question is, what tips do you have for any cities that are interested in applying for next year's cohort? And since they've been patiently waiting since the first presentation, I guess I'll just turn that to the Manhattan campaign and Dr. Yoon first. We can go from there.
Sure, thank you. I think the biggest tip for us based on our experience this year would be to start early. Start liaising with your community partner early. Start, thinking about the recruitment process early. It comes up quick. I mean, you'll hear back about whether you're going to participate or not, I think in January or February, and then it's all of a sudden spring. And then the good thing is CAPA makes it really easy because they send you all these materials. But yeah, I think establishing rapport, especially if your project is based on equity, and you're going to do a citizen science project, starting early.
Anything other than starting early from the Charleston campaign?
Maybe Kirsten could go as well. I would recommend engaging with the medical community. Far more holistic approach is happening in Charleston because of the physicians like Dr. Jerry Reeves and others who have given their time to this, and welcome in atypical partners, because the Heat Watch campaign can amplify other activities that may not be termed heat related, but could make a huge difference. What do you think, Kirsten?
Oh, you're still muted, Kirsten.
One of the groups that, I was going to say that's right. One of the groups that's been interested in this is a coalition of NGOs working on energy poverty issues and energy equity issues. And so this, even knowing what's happening in one community, helps them advocate more broadly.
And I'm going to sneak a second question in for the Indiana campaign, because as you're thinking about what tips, someone else asked if the participants in your campaign were from Indiana. And that seems like a quick question that you can answer both at the same time.
Yes, almost all of ours were from Indiana and Clarksville. I think we had one volunteer who just really liked bicycling in Louisville, and so he crossed the river just for the campaign. I would say, something else is to really, keep in mind to not overlook how important, really bringing people into your campaign is. Obviously the results are a huge thing that comes out of it. This, the heat map is really that result we're looking for. But, this is a huge opportunity to really amplify this issue and, make sure people are aware of extreme heat and get, really invested in it. So, just as you're planning around that, I would think to, just really think about how you're going to bring that to your community.
And anything else from our Mystic River campaign? Any other tips?
Well, sorry, you can go first if you want.
Oh, I was just going to say to recruit, make sure that you have a lot of people to do this because it is time consuming. It is 3 times a day. You do need a lot, especially with the campaign that we had so big. I think we probably almost got to around 200 people on our list. And even then we had to drop 3 routes. So just, if you think you are good, you're just keep getting people interested. And plus it's never a bad thing to let people know what you're doing. So.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion as well. And I will add that we did an additional run than the following day that I didn't highlight as much. And so we had a 6 a.m. on a Wednesday, and we also had a 6 a.m. on a Thursday. And so that also helped us make up for some of the data that we lost. And so over recruit and potentially add an extra time period if your funding allows. And then I would also encourage folks to not stop at the data portion, to also include funding for meaningful community engagement, for actual looking at the data, making sure that it's accurate and it follows people's lived experience and can focus on solutions building.
Great. And the next question that we have, I'm going to combine a couple, is did any of the groups presenting today work either with the National Weather Service local offices, who obviously issue the heat watches and warnings and things, or use CDC morbidity data to overlay with the information? I know the Mystic River said they were hoping to do that as a next step, but has anybody already done that?
So we've actually reached out to our National Weather Service offices, and so we actually just had a webinar with them, so we could talk about how they define extreme heat and then the process of what happens when extreme heat thresholds are met, to really think about that communication channel that happens between the National Weather Service and then our communities in Clarksville and Richmond. And what's great for both of our communities is that also on their task force are people, leaders within their emergency response programs, so that can help that protocol development. But we also plan to bring in health data too from CDC Places data, and then also we're getting emergency room visits data that we will be correlating during historical heat wave data for both of the communities.
And someone else pointed out, I don't remember myself, if Dr. Yoon, you had shared a map of some of your heat morbidity data from New York as well.
Right, yeah, so that's not from the CDC, that's from New York City. But yeah, I mean, our plan is to do a lot of that overlapping of different maps to connect it to different social equities. Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the National Weather Service, we actually did get in touch with our local office. I think we got in touch at different points, like in the spring, but I think they can't really give you an accurate prediction until I think, oh, I forget, Joey, you can chime in with accurate info here, but 2 weeks or so. We were in touch with them as often as we could, but ultimately I think it was like a week before that we were able to get like very concrete confirmation. I also, to go back to the last question, I really want to emphasize, I agree, over recruiting is so important. Yeah, that I think that actually could have been my answer also.
All right.
Have people on standby to be emergency volunteers. A lot of our staff participated as well.
And this might be a little bit preliminary, but the next question is, how will policies, infrastructure development and maintenance, capital improvement plans, maybe even things like roadway design standards and things like that, be identified and implemented as a result of this data? Have any of you started that process with the local communities yet? Or will it be another sort of phase of community engagement to present the data and iteratively move towards those standards in your communities and campaigns?
Maybe I'll
yeah. So for oh, go ahead.
Go ahead,
so
Melanie.
what's happening with South Bronx Unite? It's a bit complicated on our end, but I think this actually speaks for a lot of the realities that many of these communities face. So the South Bronx is a peninsula, and they have the most water encounterability, if you will, but they're also the only part of New York where the public does not have access to the waterfront, because there is industry all along the waterfront, and thus the only small strip that is available is actually now parceled off for condo development. And South Bronx Unite is trying to fight this and say, you know what, this is the only space available to make into green space for public use, and you're selling it off. So I feel like many of these communities are already, they're going to be fighting an uphill battle where it's not just, it's not an open plot of land that they can just say, we want this. They have to actively cancel some already existing plans to fight for what they deserve. So yeah, I think it's going to be tricky, but we have hard data, and this is why we really want to emphasize the different connections to health and morbidity, to say, this isn't just about heat, this isn't just about temperature and humidity, it's about health and well-being standards.
Yeah, I can share. We shared a little bit on the Charleston presentation as well. So when we did the sampling with the early work on the FLIR, we were looking at a 40-degree surface temperature difference in material choices. At the same time, 3 master planning teams were thinking about what needed to change in that district. So that's an opportunity to intercept, to say, let's think about material choices in terms of the retained heat and the personal experience of being on those, and what it means in terms of microclimate changes. This is also happening at the same time the city is updating its comp plan. So to have heat included in a comp plan as a look forward is a huge win. We're so grateful for those collaborators who made that happen. And then just this week, as we were looking at the data with Joey, leaders in the city were saying, well, do we need to start thinking about wind as a design strategy? And there's a history of that. If you look at Tel Aviv and the Getty's plan and what that meant for capturing the ocean breeze for cooling, and we've kind of forgotten that in the United States. So those are 3 really solid examples of how we might begin to, 1, think more carefully about material choices, 2, intercept spends that are already going to happen in order to make them do more work for heat reduction, and 3, value a natural asset that's kind of been forgotten.
Yeah, so I will add that our collaborative, the Resilient Mystic Collaborative, is really well positioned to work on this advocacy and policy piece, because it's with a lot of municipal stakeholders who have this power to work individually within their municipalities, but apply similar strategies throughout the area. But I will also say that there are several pockets of extreme heat work in the greater Boston area. They're ongoing, and we've been communicating through these different regional working groups. And some of what we're doing is making sure to, again, focus on equitable solutions and also justice, right? And so one of the clear solutions to extreme heat in terms of outdoor use is to increase tree canopy or increase park space, green space, blue space. But we want to make sure that that doesn't actually push out vulnerable communities or priority populations via climate gentrification or via green gentrification. And so we need to, and we have been talking about making sure to put funding such as Build Back Better or the infrastructure funding, all of this big funding coming our way. We're already having really big talks about that. Make sure that a lot of that goes to environmental justice communities, even beyond the EJ40, the 40% that should be going to EJ communities, and coupling that with policies that, let's say, have rent control in a certain area so people don't get pushed out. Because their rent will be increased because there's nicer park spaces that will entice wealthier and mostly white folks. And then making sure that the people who are at the table building those policies are actually members of those communities or have that lived experience. And so it's not just about making those solutions to vulnerable communities, it's making sure that there won't be any unintended consequences once those solutions are created.
And I can touch on the Indiana campaigns a little bit. This has been a large focus of the community engagement work we're doing through the survey that we're running and also through the focus groups of finding out both how people currently perceive things like tree canopy cover and green space access in the places that they live, which is why we're focusing on having people identify where their residence is within the community. And then also asking people within the focus groups, you know, what their preferred method of cooling is, what the lack that they're seeing in their community is, and what they would like best implemented in their areas. And then combining that with the data that we get from the Heat Vulnerability Index and the survey responses of where people live to determine where we should actually be targeting that focus. Not to say that, you know, people that don't live in most vulnerable areas, opinions, you know, don't hold as much weight, but it is not as, it's not as pertinent that we are implementing those strategies in those places. So just ensuring that we're finding the best places to implement the strategies that people want to see and think that would actually benefit them the most within the long term, but also combining that with, you know, what we're capable to do within our grant and our time frame of the program.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for all of your presentations, all of your responses to the questions. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Hunter and Vivek, who can talk a little bit more about the application process that's open. And there's Hunter now. So take it away, Hunter.
Great. Thank you so much to you, Cooper, and to everyone else who participated, who spoke, who helped with the organizing behind the scenes. It was fantastic. I love watching these presentations. I learned something new every time, and from every community. You're all taking slightly, you know, doing a lot of similar things, but also taking some really interesting different approaches, tackling things in different ways. So I really enjoy all of these. So and thank you to everyone who was involved in the campaigns all throughout this past year. And then I just wanted to note also, looking to the future, we're looking forward to not only working with all of you who have done campaigns already, NOAA and the National Integrated Heat Health Information System and our partners, we're all here to help you. And you know, we want to keep this dialogue open and learn and grow along with you. And part of that is also working with new communities as well. So thank you. The application page is now up on the screen, and you can see that for anyone who's interested, applications are open until January 14th. So please do let us know if you have any questions about that, but we look forward to seeing your applications then and all the community partnerships you've been able to build. And looking forward to working with all of you and with CAPA Strategies next summer on the mapping.
And I'll quickly just echo Hunter's comments, just like fantastic. It's so cool. We've done now over 50 of these and we're learning every time, and this is a work in progress. So your feedback is super helpful. Joey's mentioned the survey. Please give us feedback on that. That will be super helpful. And also to kind of think about how to, all of the presenters, panelists had identified ways to kind of continue the work. That's what we're here for. NIHHIS, CAPA, the local communities that you're working with, NLC, these are all places you could definitely look to keep this work going. The last thing we want to do is have worked with you on getting all of this off the ground and then for it to fall flat. So it's really essential in many ways to kind of keep the work going. And if there's anything any of the members on this team could help in advancing that, please let us know. Be happy to support that. Thanks again. This has been real. Thank you.
Have a great day and great holidays.